Today, we're focusing on small and medium manufacturing, reducing lost production time, meeting insurer requirements, and testing backup and recovery. No drama, just clear steps to maintain operations and meet compliance. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with SST, the LinkedIn live show where we deep dive into the real, unfiltered world of IT, cybersecurity, and business technology. Brought to you by SST, we are here to cut through the noise, share expert insights, and tackle the challenges shaping the future of managed IT services, live, raw, and unscripted. Today, we have Troy Tobin from Team SST. Welcome, Troy.
Hey, how you doing? Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks again for being on the show today. So, Troy, we're going to have a discussion around really specific to the manufacturing industry regarding IT and risk exposure. Troy's going to share with us kind of what he's seeing from the field, and we're just going to talk through a few things. I guess I'll just kind of set the stage here. Our roadmap for episode 14 here is risk that really hurts, what insurers are expecting in 2026, and then we'll go over a practical approach to reducing downtime. Does that sound fair, Troy?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So I guess we're just going to jump right into it. The risk that really hurts. Like, what's the biggest cyber risk that small and medium-sized manufacturers are facing right now that you're encountering? Maybe in our client base, prospects. What are you seeing out there?
So, in my role, which is more the sales side, right? I'm talking to a lot of manufacturers, like pre-sales and what their pain points are, and then obviously once they turn over to be customers for us, they're still on the map of what their biggest issues are, and really it's downtime, right? If you're manufacturing products, you can't have outages, right? And
Mhm.
and it's a trickle down from there, right? If you have outages, then you're not meeting delivery or quotas, or maybe you're taking a hit from reputation because your customers aren't getting what they expect, or you can't bring to market something that you're manufacturing. I would say, end all be all, downtime is the biggest risk they face.
Yeah, I mean, that can really, if you have, some obligations to deliver parts and you can't get them out the door, your reputation can be tarnished for sure. You also have like just your staff is sitting idle, possibly, right? So you have a bunch of resources that aren't actually being utilized because you got system outages and downtime. Yeah, I
So
downtime's an issue with everybody, but it seems like it's really a big deal for SMB manufacturing.
yeah, absolutely. And I think what we see, we have a lot of small businesses, but they have proprietary information, right? So that's another risk, is potentially a bad act, or not even being able to get to your proprietary information because of an outage. And when I say proprietary information, this could be just process and procedures. How you make the candy is different than somebody else. It may not be copyrighted, but it's your process and procedure. And in a cybersecurity event, you may not have access to that, or maybe something stolen, right? A customer
Mm.
list is stolen, or maybe some sort of asset is stolen, like software, or like a process or procedure. So that's another thing that is also critical for manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, so thanks for that additional point there. So when we talk about the downtime, though, it's kind of like the airplane doesn't crash because of one thing, right? The airplane usually crashes from a series of events that happened at one time or the aggregate of all them. Can you kind of go through what we're seeing, like what aggregates on the manufacturing floor to cause this outage that really is going to impact the business negatively?
Well, if you talk like maybe what types of things that manufacturers need, maybe it's a saw, or it's a supply chain, type thing, a tool or something. A lot of times what we see is those environments aren't looked at the same way as maybe their typical network, right? Maybe there isn't security or EDR on them. Maybe a device is not patched like with your normal cycle of patching because they're afraid to break something. Maybe maybe a manufacturing equipment cannot be hooked to the network or upgraded because it's old, unpatchable asset or workstation. Those are some of the things. When we talk, we see networks that aren't set up correctly. They're unsegmented. What that means is you have like your voice, your data, your wireless, everything is on a flat network, and that can cause performance issues. And also when one thing goes down or one issue arises, it affects the whole network. Those are some things we see. Or maybe an important manufacturing asset doesn't have failover, right? If one thing in the chain goes down, it brings the whole device down, rather than having a failover or a quick restoration process. Those are some things we see, and it's usually just you know data devices or not proper planning.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that, I mean, we talk about this legacy system all the time in the SMB manufacturing space, and it's nothing that they can really control. It's a lot of times the equipment manufacturers platforms are not modernized in a lot of cases, and there's not much that can be done about it um, from an upgrade standpoint. But that definitely means that we need to do extra things to protect the rest of the environment uh, and that machine as well, that aren't necessarily required in normal, completely modernized environments. Like you talk about this, unable to patch a workstation because it's maybe a Windows 7, right? I mean, we see that still frequently all the time. Is that true?
Yeah, we see that, and basically it's like, how big a deal is if this goes down? Can we put a dollar to it, and then work backwards? Like, what can we do? Like, can we segment it off? Like, we only that only certain things live in the network space that lives in, or do we unplug it unless somebody needs to come in and do work on it? Do we have an old backup Windows 7 machine in the closet? Because if this thing goes down, we can't just order another one from Dell, right? So those are some things you got to think outside the box, really, on how to resolve some of the issues.
Hmm. Hmm. And really looking at the hardware itself, right? And then the um, the inability to do modern things with it, and how that might impact the workflow process, right? What, like taking your processes in overlaying them on top of this legacy hardware, and how do we need to have backup procedures or plans for that, right? I mean, that's very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you may not be able to use your normal backup and restore procedure for one particular asset because it's not on the network or the software doesn't work. Just like, you may not be able to use your typical antivirus, anti-malware software on a particular system. Well, what does that mean then, right? How are we going to protect that machine? If we have a vendor that needs to be able to remote into, you know, uh, this asset, how is that going to work, right?
Hmm.
Do we have to have a process for that? Do we have to buy a special tool for that? And still thinking about how to protect it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, just so we don't lose sight of this, then I just want to go back to the network segmentation, how important it is, right? Because um, we have a legacy device on the network. We know we can't do anything about it. So therefore, our thought process is we're not going to do anything to any of the devices because that one we can't do anything with. So why do any of it? That's obviously not what we want to do. And then so then we'll take the next step. Let's secure all of the elements we can, but we know we can't secure this one device. Okay, that's a good approach. But if you now have not actually separated these things on the network, you're now, like, the things you just tried to secure, you're probably gonna they're compromised because you have this the entire environment's compromised because you have this unisolated, wide open risk.
Yeah, and we see manufacturers that provide some of these tools that they're not eager to work with MSPs or IT, um, because they're afraid it's going to break what's already working, right? They don't often, not saying always, but they don't really consider the other parts of the company and how to secure it. They are looking at this one device and having no outages. And sometimes that you can't look at it that way because there's other very valuable parts of the business that do need to be treated properly. So sometimes it can be difficult to get any movement with a vendor.
Yeah, I mean, in very true. I would say, in fairness to these vendors, though, these that have, like, this Internet of Things, industrially connected devices. Like, 5 years ago, there was very few of these devices connected to the network. Even the ones that were connected, like, the cyber risk wasn't nearly as great as it is now, right? Like, we see um, risk exposure is escalating, every year, and now even at a faster rate because of AI. So now these things that were maybe just sat there and they weren't targets are definitely targets now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, now, especially with everything connected to the cloud, right? I mean, so back in the day, you may have a bare metal server that controls the shop floor, right? And it's its own thing. And as long as you have power, you're not going to have an impact. Well, now you might have databases in the cloud, server workloads in the cloud. They got to talk to the things that are on prem. So you can't just sever that connection off. And so that ramped up exposure a lot. And then obviously with all the security concerns and AI, everything changes so rapidly. It's hard for vendors to, whether it's updates to software or updates to code, it's hard to stay in front of it, right? It's just a moving target.
For sure. I think this is a good segue into our next discussion point here, right? So we talked about, the major risk exposure, maybe legacy devices not segmenting the network, and that being difficult, um, but very critical. Another reason why there's a lot of criticality around this stuff, though, is because of the increased requirements to get or maintain cyber insurance. I mean, like, it still blows my mind today that we still see so many companies that are either without coverage or lacking insurance coverage. Which, I mean, that's a trend that is going to have to change. You're going to see more and more industry requirements, like to compliance requirements to have certain levels of coverage of insurance. Um, and we'll continue to try to do our job to educate is the reasons as to why that's important. A whole other subject for discussion. But I guess, Troy, can you share with us a little bit about, like, what you're seeing with regards to cyber insurance requirements specific to manufacturing that maybe wasn't there even 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of it, the requirements are based on your policy size, right? If you have and obviously policy size is based on your total revenue and things like that. But if you have a small policy, right, they usually aren't so tight with their requirements because the payout's not very large, or there's going to be fine language in there that they're going to miss and they're not going to pay out anyways. But if you have a policy that is aligned with your revenue and you're working with a good agent, the things that around COVID time, it got really serious. MFA, right on, and it used to just be MFA on admin accounts and access to firewalls and everything, and now it's MFA on everything. I mean, whether it be your email, whether it be all your network equipment, it could be for your different cloud connections to, like, your CRM or whatever software you're using. MFA is a real thing now. The other one is EDR. Used to be, we can just run Defender that's just built into Windows, or we can run an antivirus software. Now they want the, EDR software that is like anti-malware and antivirus real time
Mhm.
identification. So those
But
two things hit back about 4 years ago. You couldn't even get a policy without them. Go ahead.
yeah, that, I mean, for sure, right? And then, can you talk a little bit about maybe how backups have become such a critical part, and not just backing up, but the types of backup and really the recovery efforts being proven out? Like, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, backups obviously are critical. I mean, backups, um, people always, we have server backups, right? Our file servers backed up. but people weren't backing up the cloud, right? So backing up, let's say your Microsoft or Google environment is critical now because you have data stored out there, whether it be SharePoint or your email or whatever. So that's become a real thing now, is backing up your cloud data, either back to on-premise at your business or maybe off to another cloud location that is not Google or Microsoft. The other thing that's really changed um, was, testing those backups. Um, at least annually, maybe quarterly, to make sure that the restoration process you have in place actually functions, and the things you are getting that are trying to back up are occurring. So some of that's changed, uh, but the cloud, backing up the cloud is one thing that we don't see a lot. And then protecting the backups, like if you have a cloud backup, it's important. There's something called immutable backups, and that's where
Mhm,
it's like disconnected from the cloud, right? So
mhm.
that it's not reachable by somebody else in the cloud. It's basically turned off, if you will. So
Right.
having that immutable backup that cannot be destroyed is a critical feature. And another thing with backups is determining what do you need. What different data sets have different rules, like different retention periods, all that kind of stuff. And that's something that often we go in and they just say, yeah, we have backups, and they don't really have a plan around, what that looks like.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that so immutable backups is important just for to break it down even further. If your environment is breached, but your backups are offline, more than likely the integrity of your backups are going to be there after you recover. Whereas, before immutable backups were a thing, oftentimes your environment's breached and all your backups are corrupted too, so you can't roll back from them. Which
Yeah. Yep.
and then the other thing I was going to mention too is in our proactive delivery, we are actually testing backups with regular frequency. And like you said, depending on the priority or significance of those backup data sets, there might be different recovery efforts, but we're actually going through and testing and rehydrating that backup data, which not a lot of people are doing. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I've had one pre-sales meeting where they know that their backups are being tested. They say, yeah, last time we asked for a restore on this mailbox, they were able to do it, but there's no like proactive testing or sort
Mhm.
of DR drill. I want to just say one thing with the cloud backups that a lot of people don't think about. I mean, they say, well, we've never lost a mailbox. I think what the biggest issue is when it comes to a Google or Microsoft environment is if somehow an administrative account gets hacked, then they have access to the whole castle. They can delete all your email, they can delete all your SharePoint, all your OneDrive, all your Teams, and then ask you for a ransom to get that data back.
Mhm.
So a breach in the cloud is why you want to have a backup of your cloud environment somewhere else.
Yeah, good point. Can I ask you a little bit about um, incident response and like how important is that today? What are the requirements that you are seeing from cyber insurance providers around incident response?
I think more of that there is an incident response plan, right? So there's a documented incident response plan. If an incident, and sometimes it's could be a cybersecurity incident response plan, even more defined, and it's documenting the steps. Who is involved at what time, right? I mean, do you have internal IT? Do you have an outsourced IT? Do you have insurance? And when do each come into play, right? So it's that diagnose. What is it? Diagnose, identify. You know what I'm talking about, and then
Hmm.
and then recover kind of thing. And it's just they want to see. It's not as much like 15-minute response time. I don't see that kind of thing. It's just having a plan of all the players involved and when do they get contacted and documenting that, and then testing it, right? I mean, you have to test the plan to make sure it actually works.
Hmm. I mean, and that's the thing. I think in the future, cyber insurance carriers are going to require that you are actually running through these incident response plans and or participating in these tabletop exercises at least once a year. I believe that that's coming down the road here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's not. I was going to say, it's not just the IT department, right, or your MSP. It's the whole business, right? Your instant response plan is kind of your business continuity plan, right? If all this goes away, who needs to be involved and who needs to make decisions? So it involves the whole company, not just your IT team.
Yeah, I mean, like in a crisis situation, if you could have an option of two options, right? Having a plan or not having a plan. In a crisis situation, if you have no plan, the outcome's not going to be very good.
No, absolutely. And even if you somehow get to your end result, it's obviously going to be way delayed as opposed to having a plan.
hmm and more expensive.
Yep.
It's the left a boom, right a boom thing, right, that we talk about all the time.
Hmm.
Uh, so one last thing I just want to touch on then is like having it's kind of like the backups, but it's not, and it's specific to updates, right? So having some kind of automated process and tools to do the proper updates. But in addition to that, how important is having the ability to roll back updates? And do you see that very often, like something that's done in a process followed?
Oh yeah, I mean that's something what we definitely want to use. Like in MSP space, we use like an RMM tool, right, to help manage those updates. And I'm thinking software updates and operating system updates is what I'm kind of thinking about. But if you use the traditional built-in system, when you get an update that affects your production, you may have to roll back. uh, it may be painstakingly to roll those back, or you're going to have to roll back the whole environment, multiple machines, or you might have to restore from backup. Where if you use a qualifying RMM tool, right, you can roll those patches off individual machines, individual patches, and do some testing. Right, this is even sometimes why you might have a test environment that you may patch 2 days before your production patching to make sure that there was no issues. But in cases, we see a lot more success with patching when you have a tool that handles the patching. And you can also report better on the patching, right? That you get a report that shows, I'm at 98%. Well, 2% is the machine we can't patch, right? For X, Y, Z reason. But that's where I really see more success with the better tools involved.
Yeah, I mean, sort of wrap the kind of first two segments up together here. We talked about the biggest risks, then we talked about what cyber insurance carriers are looking for, and in actuality, we start to do those things that they really want us to have in the environment. We're actually going to improve our exposure to risk and the impact and the downtime that our environment will could suffer from. So it's like stronger controls, better proof, better renewals, lower premiums, and a stable environment on your operations on your manufacturing floor.
Absolutely. Yep.
Um, so the last kind of thing I just want to kind of rip through like if we're going to look at a real practical way of reducing downtime, if you had somebody that was going to listen to you and you could give them 30 to 60-day improvement plans, what would be the first kind of five things you'd maybe look at?
The first thing we tell people is you have to inventory everything, all your technology. This includes your software assets and hardware assets. Knowing what you have on your network, right? And not identifying the device, its born on date. Where's support come from for this device? Is it from a hardware manufacturer? Is it from an MSP? And then what all software is used in your environment? Who owns it? Is there support on it? And so all those things, like that's your biggest thing. It gives you a place to start. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I would say. Um,
Okay, I just comment
yep.
like you can't protect or secure what you don't know you have.
Yep.
And people have probably heard the term shadow IT. This is like shadow IT hardware, shadow IT software. This is software or hardware that is brought into your organization, and it's not secured or maintained the way that your rest of your stuff might be. And like staff brings it in because it's more convenient, not necessarily understanding or knowing that they're actually exposing the rest of the environment, and now that shadow IT becomes a vector of attack.
just a quick example, I was at a pharmacy when we got in there and did an assessment. They had 6 VPN tools in their environment. They had no idea what they were used for. A couple of them were, potentially bad actor type tools. But some of them could be legit, like somebody needed to log in to fix a machine, but they didn't know, and that's
Mhm.
that's scary.
Well, and the one thing I would just, when you mentioned hardware and software as well, this is what we're telling our clients. This is what we do when we onboard them. We take them on this, SIRE journey under our managed services. But really, we focus on hardware and software because we align our clients to the CIS framework, which is control 1 and 2, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, super important. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, making sure you have MFA on the critical pieces, right? On any admin accounts that are definitely remote access ones, like VPN tunnels, you want to have MFA on, uh, and you want to remove admin accounts that aren't in use, right? And you want to reduce the amount of admin accounts to as bare minimum as you need. And you only want to use administrative accounts when you have to do a function that needs that administrative account. You know, your head of your CF or a CTO or whatever shouldn't be an admin, right? He should have access to an admin account if he needs to get into something that requires it. So that's one thing is the MFA on anything critical. We want MFA on everything that we can,
Mhm.
but the most critical accounts need it for sure. Like we
So
talked
we
about, yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say backups, like we talked about, proving your backups work, right? Having at least an annual backup restoration test of your most critical data is and also making sure the immutable copy is available in a critical situation, and having some reports that run daily, at least weekly, that's showing that you are in fact backing up what you say. A lot of the backup softwares do their own test, right? The test the backup jobs that they're functioning, but we also think it's important to actually tabletop it, and actually do a restoration that would be in our incident response plan. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you got three. You got two more for me.
Yeah, so discipline patching, right? Making sure you're doing the monthly Microsoft patches, any sort of patches that you would need for, other software assets that you have, and having a rollback plan should you encounter a problem with those patches. And then the last, you know, determining what you need to do in your network to separate, different devices, right? You don't want your endpoints on the same network segment as a critical database and production server. You don't want if your phone system is voice over IP, you want that segmented in its own location. Maybe security cameras in another, right? So just making sure the things, and that goes for organizing, it goes for performance, and also for recovery, right? So not everything's on one flat network. Those would be the five I would say.
Sure. So just to recap, we said hardware and software inventory, MFA on high privilege accounts and everywhere you possibly can, backups, including immutable copies and restoring from them, patched a disciplined patch process with rollback capability, which we've mentioned all these already, but we're just kind of recapturing all of it. And then network segmentation or separating those different components on your network, isolating them from each other, only having, giving access to what, think people need access to and what services need access to what, right? So hardware software inventory, MFA, backup and recovery, patch discipline, network segmentation. Awesome. Five five really good areas to kind of lean into. I guess let's see. We're kind of getting to the end here. What do we have? We have like less than a minute. If we said if we're gonna just go back to um, if you had to identify one kind of overlooked control that improves insurance conversations the most, what would you say that would be?
I would say, anything in CIS IG1, whether it be credentials and admin accounts, patching, those would be, I know I named three there, but those would be the things that I see the most. And they're easily fixable.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, we're at the end of our time here, Troy. Thanks again for jumping on today and sharing your insights with everybody watching. Looking ahead, preparation and clarity matter more than ever in 26. Thanks for joining us on Unscripted with SST, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.